And let's talk about Kevin Spacey's association with the blue and white 51st state, and all of my Karen Reed people need to listen up to this, because I'm tying a lot of things together, folks, and remember, they cannot have this international ring without the lawyers. And some of you might not even know this, because I certainly didn't know about this, but apparently Kevin Spacey was being sued in London for assault cases in a civil trial, and I think it was 6 accusers that came forward, but just in March, he decided he was going to settle with them. Kevin Spacey has a lot more red flags in his background than just having the same lawyer as Harvey Weinstein. Like, for example, this article that was pretty recently written in which he said that he was welcomed in the 51st state, and apparently his longtime manager had given him a ring engraved in Hebrew that said, "This too shall pass," when the allegations first came out. Then I found out that the first time that he visited the blue and white 51st state was in 1986, which just so happens to be the same year in which Anthony Rapp said that Spacey assaulted him when he was a 14-year-old child on Broadway. And thanks to Becca Day's explosive Tara Mar article, she included this picture of Amir Dosal and Kevin Spacey together. And if y'all have heard her reporting about this issue, he was on the board of directors with the Humpty Dumpty Institute with Mark Epstein, was involved in Tara Mar, etc., etc. And in 2024, Kevin Spacey not only endorsed Robert F. Kennedy, but that same year, he went to the border after October 7th. He went there with a pro-blue and white journalist and was visiting a friend's daughter who was serving on the... There's also a lot of subtle connections to Epstein, not just the plane that he and Bill Clinton and Chris Tucker took to Africa. Because not only was he friends with Bill Clinton before his presidency, but in 2011, Kevin Spacey took to the streets to protest something with Jude Law. And just a few years prior, Jude Law had done a remake of the movie Alfie, in which Anushka, one of the Epstein accusers, was in it. He also starred in a television show with actress Joan Severance, whom I have previously theorized was one of Epstein's honeypots, because she dated Robin Leach, who was the host of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, who did a profile on Epstein for an episode, and you may also remember him from this complaint in the files. Now, my Karen Reed fam, we all know that Alan Jackson represented both Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey. He didn't just represent Kevin Spacey in his trials on the West Coast, he represented him on the East Coast as well. In 2017, inspired by the Me Too movement, Anthony Rapp came forward about what happened to him with Spacey. But in 2019, he was actually criminally charged in Boston, Massachusetts for assaulting an 18-year-old busboy. His victim's mother actually used to be a Boston TV anchor, which is probably why this got so much attention. It's kind of weird to me that he hired Alan Jackson, who is based out of LA, to be his lawyer in this case, because Alan Jackson had not represented Kevin Spacey in a trial yet. That would come later on in the civil trial, which Kevin Spacey was found not liable for what he did to Anthony Rapp. My Karen Reed people know that the lore goes that she reached out to Harvard asking for the School of Criminal Justice Institute for advice. That professor told her to look into Kevin Spacey's case in Nantucket, which is weird to me that they would make that connection because it has nothing to do with anything that Karen herself was facing. So it's a little confusing how Alan Jackson came into play. Was there really not any lawyers closer to home? That is, until you look into who's in charge of the Harvard Law School Criminal Justice Institute. Ronald S. Sullivan Jr., who just so happens to be one of the lawyers for Harvey Weinstein. And mind you, Harvey Weinstein had not yet hired Alan Jackson. Ron Sullivan Jr. and Alan Jackson never worked together on any of Harvey's trials. It wasn't until the 2022 criminal case out of LA that we knew that Alan Jackson was working for him. Prior to this, in 2015, Alan Jackson had gotten a Saudi billionaire's son off of accused rape, as well as represented and won the case in which he represented the Prince of Saudi Arabia. And I'm telling you, somehow he won this case, even though the witnesses outside of his mansion in California witnessed a staff member bloody, terrified, trying to scale the fences of the property to get away because she said that he had tried to force her to do things to him. This guy that he got off despite a screaming bloodied woman coming out of his house making these claims, he's currently the first cousin of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. You know, the guy accused of murdering the journalist and was just invited to the White House, has massive ties with Epstein. And as far as we can tell, that introduction between the two of them happened around the same time that the Saudi prince was accused. Jackson also represented this man out of California who was the leader of a cult church and was charged with all of these terrible things. was basically a child rush hour ring, and witnesses said that it had been going on in the church for generations. Jackson also represented this man, who was an architect and an Academy member, considered one of the top movie theaters and sound studio designers, designing home studios for the likes of Coppola, Lucas, Scorsese, Spielberg. He also is very heavily tied to the 51st state. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for child things. And in fact, he met one of his victims at the synagogue that he founded. Oh, and by the way, they've already let him out. Yeah, they already let him out. And as we all know from the Karen Reed case, that Jackson also had close ties with Marty Weinberg, who was probably the most trusted lawyer of Epstein, bringing Marty Weinberg in to handle the federal appeals case in her case. And let's not forget, he's done numerous interviews at this point with Billy Bush, famously of the grab him by the... And don't know if y'all know this, but Billy Bush is in fact the cousin of George W. Given everything that I've reported and that we've uncovered about the Bush family, yeah, maybe that's why he laughed along with Trump when he said it. Maybe that's why Trump felt so comfortable discussing things like that. So yes, everybody deserves a good defense, but Alan Jackson seems way too closely related to all of these people in this particular ring at these times for it to be a coincidence. Seems to me like he is a fixer. He comes in and he cleans up the messes that happen. I think what is more likely is Karen reached out to Ron Sullivan Jr., who put her in touch with him, specifically saying, hey, I think I've got a case for you. And Alan Jackson probably needed some pretty good PR at this point after all of the scuzzballs he was known for representing. But more than that, I think that Alan Jackson was probably sent there to do damage control on the information that was coming out of that case. Numerous times I have made videos connecting the Epstein ring, Whitey Bulger, all of that stuff still happening in the area. I think that the Karen case might have accidentally been perpetrated by one of the arms of this conspiracy, one of the enforcers, one of the people that recruit. Now, given what we've seen from the text messages of Proctor and Good and all those people, I think this goes so much farther than just run-of-the-mill racism. And in order to keep people from digging any deeper into the McAlbert family, they had to keep the conspiracy contained.